Welcome, guys. I've been definitely meaning to talk about this more. Maybe this will become a series. I am not entirely sure if this will become a series, but you know. Um, so, layman philosophy. The way I look at layman philosophy is to sort of deal with the immediacy for the layman. So that would be sort of concepts like dating, sexual tensions, and so on, right? So I recently came across a video, I think a podcast, Fresh and Fit. Now, Fresh and Fit is a podcast where it's led by a group of men, or two men specifically, and they basically get women on the show and they start talking about basically sexual relations and women and man relations, right? So everything that I'm going to be talking about sort of like in relation to this video from Fresh and Fit, where they are podcasts. They talk about you know women and their wants and men and their wants, and so it's an interesting dynamic, but ultimately the conversations that sort of had is sort of very flawed in that dynamic. So, for example, in the dating culture seems to have this understanding that if you are dating someone, that you cannot have any sexual tension or any sexual yearning for another that is not your significant other, basically. Um, but I feel like actually dating culture is actually stuck in what I would call maybe like no tension. They don't want tension. There is no tension. And even the symptom of friend zone, right? I think actually friend zone is more of a living in tension than, like, let's say, like getting the girl per se, right? So the dating like metaphysical landscape would be something like this, right? Just to give you an example, there's the woman and the man, right? That's sort of like the tension already. But then there's what the sort of the initial tension would obviously be like the sexual attraction and so on, right? It doesn't necessarily imply that they both have sexual tension. They could have sexual attraction, both of them. But let's just say one of them has the sexual attraction towards the other, right? But the other doesn't want anything to do with that person, right? So now what's interesting is that individual. So I'm going to try to try to make this as concrete as possible. So for example, if you like a woman and she doesn't like you back, right? So in man language, it becomes you're like friend zone, right? So not only do you have your tension with the woman that you like, but also you have a tension with your own self because you cannot actually achieve the desired goal that you want, right? So meaning that you want to sleep with this woman, or you want this woman to be in your life, or so on. So now you have two tensions that you're dealing with by being a friend. You have the sexual tension, and then you have the tension between the limit. So the limit is actually always going to be the sort of barred um, notion or barred limit that the woman imposes, to which you are just a friend. So that friend itself becomes a limit that you now have tensions with, right? In conjunction with your own sexual tensions with towards the woman. So there's essentially two tensions going on. There's tensions that you have with the limit, being a friend, and then the tension of the sexual attraction going on, right? Meaning that you cannot act on the sexual attraction because actually you are limited by the limit itself, which is a tension, but you yourself have a tension with the limit. So there's two tensions going on at the same time. But so so again, what makes the human being, and this is what I'm trying to get at, and why I don't like fresh and fits kind of like thinking, is because what they're trying to say is that, and this sort of roots, for some reason, I think dating culture has been sort of grounding itself in sort of non-tension. Meaning that if a man becomes friend-zoned, a woman is playing the man, and the man is just sort of like being a simp, or like, a naive man, so on and so on. But see, the problem is that you have men that don't know how to live in the tension, so that means they don't want to be friends with the other, the woman or whatever person they're sexually attracted to. And then, so that means, so like that becomes like the limit itself, where the limit means we want no, no tension, no tension whatsoever. I simply want to get what I want, right? I simply want to have what I want, meaning no tension. But it's very ironic, isn't it, that we want a sort of state of no tension, but at the same time, our desire sort of feeds itself off of that tension anyways. So if I were to give like a real example of this, it would be like, you desire ice cream, right? The very fact that you don't have ice cream sort of feeds that desire and its circularity. But the moment you actually have the ice cream, that desire vanishes, and so on. So that means when we start talking about, oh, hey, Sam, I'm actually talking about the conversation we had earlier about friendships and sexual tension. Basically, I'm identifying like that dating culture seems to be grounded in having no tension. So, for example, if a man has a sexual attraction to another woman while he's in a relationship, right, this becomes a tension. But the thing is, in dating culture, they don't want that tension to exist. Meaning, like, the woman that you're with doesn't want you to be attracted to anybody else. But that unfortunately feeds into like a negative feedback loop where the man is trying not to be sexually attracted to anybody else, only to his partner. And so that means that it's going to evolve into like some type of effacement where actually he ends up cheating as much as he tries himself to not to pretend to not be attracted to other people and things and so on. So this sort of feeds itself into a negative feedback loop, meaning that dating culture seems to be obsessed with having no tension. The same thing with the concept of like friend zone, right? Friend zone actually, in my opinion, seems to be the only real true tension that is actually that a man can actually embrace, because what you have is the man having sexual attraction to the woman, which is self-attention, but then the woman proposes the limit, right? Or the situation itself proposes the limit. It doesn't have to be the woman. The situation itself proposes the limit, meaning that you cannot be with this person for said reasons. So now you have tensions with that limit, while you have tensions with the actual attraction itself. But then the limit prevents you from fulfilling that sexual attraction and so on. So there's two tensions, and that can be embodied in basically a man being a friend with a woman. But I've always been surprised about, like biological explanations, right? Like, I think I saw a commercial like 2 weeks ago, where it's like, monogamy is like a made up structure and so on. But what I find fascinating is that actually, if I just enact on my biological instincts, I'm sort of like living a life of no tension, which means basically I'm just being an animal. I'm living a life of no tension. The thing that is unique about the human being is that you can actually choose to live a life in tension, because we can will and so on, and all these other things. So it seems like I said, it seems like dating culture is very much opposed to living in tension. And they don't like that sort of notion. Because to live in tension would be actually to accept that, men and women both have, that they can be sexually attracted to other people besides their partner. Um, but to truly live in this tension is to sort of actually acknowledge that you have that desire, while at the same time living in the tension of committing yourself to one specific partner. So you have two tensions that you are having like this dialectical conversation with, that becomes embodied in, being a partner or being a friend. The problem with, sort of the dating realm today is that only men simply want to have the woman wants simply to have the man. And so what ends up happening is just, there is no real tension. And so actually, tension itself becomes sort of uh, ridiculed, right? So actually, like the notion of being friend zone is actually the ridiculing of tension itself, actually. And the same thing if you're actually already in a relationship, right? The very fact that someone says that you shouldn't be attracted to anybody else but me, this is the ridiculing of tension, like it's sort of the erasing of tension. But unfortunately, the very erasing of tension brings about a sort of self-effacing tension, meaning it brings about the opposite intention itself, meaning that the man will probably cheat or the woman will probably cheat, or if they don't cheat, then it leads up into like a breakup, so on and so on. So it does seem like, at least from my understanding, that does seem to be the case, where it's like loyalty, the advertisement of loyalty seems to be the eraser of all tensions, right? Like you're just supposed to be loyal. Um, but I think that notion of loyalty is not, it seems like actually true loyalty seems to be actually to remain in that tension and remain in it always. So that means acknowledging that you do have sexual desires for other people and so on, and that, but then you also understand that you're committed to this person, so that's tension. And so that remaining in that tensions, both of those tensions itself, is what I would call loyalty, commitment, so on. Um, and then I think the other thing that seems to be a more subtle tension going on is that a lot of people want to be placed in specific categories. So, for example, friends, they want to be, you know, a wife or a husband, or you know, they want to have this achievement of a category, basically. But if you are trying to meet a person in a genuine fashion, then, but if you are sort of aiming towards a specific category, it's possible that your very aiming of that specific category prevents you from actually meeting a person in a very genuine way. But let me see what Samantha, you said here. You said, it seems that tension allows for certain freedoms of truth, and having those freedoms can actually help relationships grow and understand boundaries. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Now, I've definitely talked to some people about, like, when you begin, meeting another person, sometimes it's best to sort of lay out, what you want, right? Like you want children, you want to be married eventually, and so on, and you have these goals, correct? Um, I think some people, um, I think that's good to say all those things eventually. Um, but I think some people sort of take those saying of those things as like, when they meet the other person, like, I want you to be that person, right? I want me to be that person when I talk about all those things. And so it seems like we begin a tension with the concept, the category that we want to be, and the very fact that we're not that category as of yet, or that person is not that category as of yet. So, uh, yeah, it's almost like they want to be that embodied category, but the very fact that you want to be that embodied category, meaning like you want to be husband, you want to be wife, you want to have children, that can actually prevent you, in some ways, from meeting the person. Um, So that's why it seems like there needs to be like a mutual proposal, right? So for example, if I meet a woman and I say I want children, and the woman responds and says, well, I don't want children, right? Now here we have some tension, right? We have some real tension. Now, for a human being, wanting to have children or not wanting to have children, those are values for a person. Sometimes those values are actually hard values, meaning that they won't give way to that value unless that value is achieved. Um, so what happens here in this case, right? And I think this is where like dating almost negates itself in this very moment, where it's like you're looking for this specific something, and then you always run counter to that wanting. But of course, this always assumes you know what you want. I think that's some of the things that dating actually always fundamentally is grounded on. That when we talk about things, we assume we know what we want, right? But there can actually be many cases of like the element of surprise where you meet a woman or a man, and the element of surprise is that they actually show you something that you thought you wanted, but actually you end up being shown that you want something more. You want something other, right? Um, it could be the case that if you want children and the woman is opposed to having children, it could be the case that the woman sort of reveals something in that relation between you and her that you end up saying to yourself, actually, maybe I don't want children. Right? You run into like that surprising element of like, actually, maybe I don't want children, right? Because I've met this woman and I don't know. It's like you can't really explain it, but you're willing to give up that value in some ways. And so this is what I would call like the element of surprise. The same thing with women, maybe not wanting children, but then they meet a man and it's like, oh, actually, I'm willing to give way to this, right? So this willingness to give way, in my opinion, is interesting because I'm not sure if it's a tension or sort of like releasing, a momentary releasing of a tension that is actually was never there. So what do I mean by like a tension that was never there? Meaning like you realize that sometimes actually as the subject, the dating subject, we create tensions that aren't actually real. The only time that we actually encounter real tensions is actually when we are trying to meet the person, right? So for example, if you try to meet a person and you already have all these ideas about what you want, right? Like I want to be married, I want to have children, da 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 da, right? And then you're just literally meeting the person just to hear them say what you want to hear, then you're not meeting them, right? But again, you're creating some type of tension within that very meeting that actually prevents what I would call an actual tension to arise. Now, I think sometimes that actual tension can arise when someone fervently disagrees with your values. But again, that only works if you're willing to sort of release your constructed tension and to actually encounter a real concrete tension, right? A real concrete tension, in my opinion, carries surprise within itself. That sort of feeds and sustains the relationship that you may or may not have been looking for from the initial starting point. But yeah, this is something that I always think about because for me, a layman's life is very much captured by this sort of realm, right? The dating realm, the realm of relationships. The layman is not necessarily going to be cognizing like, Hegelian absolute knowing or Nishida's thing, right? Dating tip, it's not a job interview. Yes, exactly, right? So this this sort of dating is always like an interview. But you see, that's a construction that you are making some type of tension that is not even there. You're already constructing a tension that doesn't exist in the moment of meeting a person. So how do we have more concrete tensions today. That is something that I would like to flesh out a little bit more. Of course, this kind of goes in with like my reading of Buber and so on, but I think for strictly layman philosophy, that would seem to be the question. How do we create concrete tensions? How do we maintain concrete tensions? I think this is, you know, almost seems like the best way to approach it. And Samuel, yeah, job interview tip: it's not a date. Yes, yeah, right. Um, so yeah, I think that's as much as I can get. I think the other thing from Fresh and Fit, I think Fresh and Fit as a podcast is actually a very interesting sort of like dating, philosophical study, because what you have is you have men saying that um, women should succumb to a specific role and men should be placed in a specific role. But the problem with their notion of providing and their notion of roles is still too, how can I put it? It's it's a fake understanding of what these actually mean, right? So they're saying, for example, I'll give you an example of like what Fresh and Fit actually said to these women on the podcast, right? They're saying, okay, if you're a woman that actually makes a lot of money and you want a high quality man who also makes a lot of money, the Fresh and Fit's argument is actually that this high quality man doesn't, you making more money doesn't actually make a high quality man want you because he already has money, right? He already has money. So why would he care? And so it seems more attractive to him to want to provide to somebody that doesn't have that much, and so on, right? So this is the Fresh and Fit's argument. Now, this presupposes that providing is strictly economical, right? And unfortunately, what the woman is trying to express is that it almost seems like she's going for like an affect of recognition, um, where it seems like we don't need to acknowledge equality within the relationship, but what it almost seems like what the women were trying to express is they want an affect of equality, if that makes any sense, right? So technically, right, so to make this a little bit more clear, technically women and men are always different, right? Technically, but on an affect level, they want to be seen as equal, right? So to simply dismiss the affect level of equality kind of misses the whole picture in a way, right? So like the men in Fresh and Fit, they're arguing on like some type of technicality, like look, providing, economics, so on. But it's the affect that is actually more concrete than the technical. And this is something actually Daniel Garner just said today on the net. So you know the men would be right in the sense that yes, technically, you know, there's a difference between men and women, so on and so on. We won't pretend those things. But on the concrete, on the affect level, equality can be sort of mutually determined. And it seems like, you know, a woman making a lot of money seems like I don't think the intention wants to be seen as like this is a woman that makes a lot of money. I don't think that's my suspicion is that's not the thought behind a woman's thinking. I think when a woman is sort of aiming for a lot of money, I think what she's wanting to be seen as a sort of equal person in value, right? An equal person in value. I think that's what fundamentally she's going for. So she's going for some type of affect rather than some type of technical recognition, which I feel like Fresh and Fit, you know, Fresh and Fit, we're just doing like a technical recognition where they're trying to say, look, a man with a lot of money is not going to care about whether you make a lot of money or not, right? But again, that's strictly a technical sort of understanding, right? But it's always very fascinating, sort of like studying their videos because they have a lot of biological explanations for sort of eliminating tension, right? The only tension that they seem to want to ever have is just the biological tension. That's it. Like, I'm attracted to you, you're attracted to me, so on. You stay in your role, I stay in my role, yada yada. This is the only tension that they seem to settle for. Um, but if you give in to that sort of biological tension, then there really is no tension at all, right? You just have man getting his sexual pleasure, and women, you know, trying to see her worth and all of that. But that is something that is not real concrete tension. uh, so actually, I would say for to have like a counterexample, a woman sort of making just as much money as a man would, right, would create actually a concrete tension in some ways, right? Because that actually would question the role of their notion of provider, right? Meaning that would actually make you sublate the notion of providing into another kind of providing that isn't strictly economical, right? Because there is no tension between that economical, it seems like men or women will always stay within the economical tension of like, I have to make less money or he has to make more money, so on and so on. But actually, if you have a woman that's making just as much money as you, this creates a nice tension of, well, okay, how do I then provide if money isn't what's going to necessarily be the problem, right? Um, so it seems like there is no wanting to look for tensions in the dating sphere. Rather, they just want to stay at a tension that seems comfortable, right? Which means you never break your notions of providing, you never break your notions of what love means, you never break your notions of anything else. So it's basically a tension that is just a sameness disguised as difference, basically. That's the problem. You have, and this is what I keep calling like a false tension. It's not real. It's simply like your nice, comfortable, constructed tension that you would like to have. But again, if the person follows into your tension, then there isn't a real tension, you know. Um, so if you guys want like a humorous example, watch the '70s show, um, and with the wife and the husband, right? Like that's actual. Was it Donna's parents? Actually, it's Donna's parents that are actually really funny with the tensions, right? Because Donna's mother wants to be like this feminist and so on, and then like Donna's dad is like this super like misogynistic like a man, and he's like asking his wife, he's like, why do you want to take these like self women empowering classes? Like, like for me, like this is actual real concrete tension here. Because if Donna's mother sort of gives in, um, that isn't no longer the tension, right? So, yeah, I think that's really the end of my talk. I didn't really mean to be that long. But if there's any questions, um, Sam's like, yeah, the two Sams. It's nice to see the two Sams were able to join. Yeah, I think that's it. I plan on writing something like this. I would like to write this, but I figured I'd talk about it and sort of um, try to think it out before I write it. Of course, writing always involves me thinking out more, but I always like the idea of recording, thinking out my thoughts in time, and then thinking it out again as I'm writing. See what else I come up with. But yeah, this sort of ends with the layman philosophy of dating. Hopefully, I can talk about other things as well, which I think I do. I think I want to talk about the recent phenomena of like Kanye West, Shia LaBeouf. Um, I think Shia LaBeouf proposes a very interesting layman problem with his recent conversion of Catholicism and so on. But yeah, I'd like to kind of go into that as well. But anyways, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later if I can figure out how to end this video. Okay, bye guys.